Welcome to Race to Win, a sailing podcast brought to you by RaceQs.com. We analyze RaceQ's 3D regatta replays and review racing tactics, rules, and winning strategies. I'm Julia, and today we're going to be discussing my favorite starting strategy, which is the PortTackApproach. It's a great start, but you will need to put on your big girl pants when you scoot across half your fleet on PortTack. As always, you see here the RaceQ's starting box with the green pacer line showing the correct pace for an on-time start. The green box starts shrinking about 1 minute to the starting gun. And when that green pacer line meets the start line, that's the start. Watching this visually makes it really easy to evaluate how good all these boats were at judging their time and distance to the start. Now, this is a replay, again, from the 2013 Melges Worlds, so a lot of these guys are professional sailors. When I watch this, it seems like they have almost a sixth sense about when they need to slow down or speed up in order to be on time to the start with good speed. A lot of sailors view this PortTackApproach as kind of a desperate move that you don't really want to do. It is certainly one to keep in your back pocket if you end up in a bad situation where you're kind of behind the fleet and it looks like you're really going to be starting near the back of the pack. But I don't think you should discount the PortTackApproach right off the get-go. When you're in a really huge fleet and it's difficult to find holes using a standard starboard tack approach to the line, this PortTackApproach really can be beneficial. In one of the sailing Bibles, Getting Started in Sailboat Racing by Adam Court and Richard Stearns, they give a really good example of when you would want to use this PortTackApproach. The example that they use is the Tartan 10 fleet at the Detroit or Chicago National Offshore One Design Regatta, otherwise known as the Nudes. We're talking 40 to 45 boats, each of them over 33 feet long, all starting at the same time. That means a starting line over 2,000 feet long, with boats coming at you from every direction. It's really close quarters. If you asked the competitors, they would have said there was hardly any room for all of them to fit on that starting line. But there was a sailing photographer named Walter Cooper there taking pictures from the air. And when they developed these films, this was a while ago when you still had to develop films apparently, they saw big holes in the fleet where it looked like anyone could have gotten a great start with clear air. The point being that even in large competitive fleets like that, if you have a proper starting approach, maybe something that's a little different than what everybody else is doing, you can still find a hole to start in with clear air. So let's take a look at this diagram, again from the book Getting Started in Sailboat Racing. I'm using the second edition, and learn how to do this whole PortTackApproach. So you're going to start by reaching away on starboard tack with about 3 minutes left to the start. Just reach there beyond the pin and head out of the starting area. And then you're going to want to turn around and head back with, let's say, about 1:50 to the start. You don't want to just divide the time in half, because then when you come back, you're not going to have enough time to make your tacks and get to the starting line. Leave yourself plenty of time once you get back. We're leaving ourselves almost double here because we've sailed away for 1 minute and we're sailing back for almost 2 minutes. That extra minute is going to give us the maneuvering room that we need to sail down the starting line and look for our hole. So again, we're sailing back with about 1:50, let's say, to the starts. Now is the time when you need to kind of be right on your toes. You're going to be sailing back across the fleet on port tack, which means you don't have right-of-way. So you're going to be ducking people left and right, which is kind of a sailing term for taking their stern, or guessing and hoping that you can make it in front of them, clear away, without causing them to change course. So that's why I say this isn't really a start for somebody that's faint of heart. So you're port tacking across the fleet, and while you're just having this crazy moment of boats coming at you left and right, and you're trying not to hit anybody, you also need to be looking there at the starting line. Now, if this isn't the kind of multitasking that you signed up for, maybe you want to have somebody else looking for the hole back at the starting line. But at some point, ideally, you're going to see a gap between all those boats that are lining up to the start. The clock is ticking down, and let's say now, all of a sudden, you see a hole. It's, let's say, 3 boat lengths wide, just came out of nowhere. You don't want to tack right into it. You want to sail all the way as far as you can to the windward side of the hole and then tack. What that does is it puts you on the upwind side of the hole, giving you leeward position over the rest of the fleet. Let me explain why that's important. Let's start with the starboard tack right of way. I think of the race course like a hill, okay? Where the wind is coming from, that's the top of the hill. So let's say the wind is coming directly from the windward mark. It's a perfectly straight race course. But generally, that direction is the top of the hill, okay? You want to get as much up the hill as you can, when you're sailing upwind, of course, because the first person to the top of the hill wins. Just think about it that way. It's really simple. So let's say right now you're on starboard tack. How do you know if you're on starboard tack? Well, you're sailing up a hill. If you see the top of the hill over the starboard side of your boat, you're on starboard tack and you have right of way. Another way to think of it is if the wind is coming over the starboard side of your boat, you're on starboard tack. If you see the top of the hill over the port side of your boat, the wind is coming over the port side of your boat, you do not have right of way. You need to give way to people on starboard tack. Totally arbitrary, but really important. Most people don't have too much trouble with this rule. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's talk about the next part. One of the advantages to this start, the port tack approach, is that when you finish it, you're on starboard tack and you have leeward position over the rest of the fleet. So what the heck does that mean? Leeward is a little tricky for some people, but I have an easy way to explain it to you. Remember, just think of the race course as being on a hill. The whole thing, the whole surface of the water is slightly tilted. It's just a little bit uphill to go to the mark. So if you think of it this way, if you are downhill from somebody else, you're leeward. The windward boat is the boat that's closer to the wind. Now, the leeward boat is the one that can push the other boat around. Which makes sense, right? If you're standing uphill from someone, you're not going to push them down the hill. That's just rude. But a downhill person might push an uphill person a little bit, maybe give them a little shove, nudge them a little further up the hill. So again, leeward is the boat that is further downwind, and they are the ones that have right of way. So let's go back to our little diagram here. So as you can see, you're going to sail away. Sail back on port tack, crossing your fingers, ducking, dodging, paying attention, trying not to have any problems. Then when you see your hole, you're going to sail all the way to the far side and then tack. Now you're on starboard. Whew, you made it. Now you don't have to worry about everybody because you have the same right of way as they do. And then the second law of right of way is leeward versus windward. You're all on starboard tack. So you've got this boat right next to you here. You have right of way over him, which means you can push him up a little bit if you want to. Push him around. Not too far. There's some more rules about that. But basically, you're in the controlling position. Because you sailed all the way to the far side of this hole, the most uphill part, you can turn downhill just a little bit as you start and get that little burst of speed and clear air that can make a huge difference at the start. So let's watch this guy do it. It's really a great example. I'm not sure if he planned this. It looks like he got a little bit far behind here and then decided, you know what, I'm going to try something different. So we're taking a look at boat 55, and you can see on the right-hand side the time until start. We have about 50 seconds left. Of course, we can see it's less than a minute because we have our green pacer line and green starting box is shrinking. So he was sailing along, reaching in, reaching out on this big, long starting line, and he's kind of stuck behind this line of boats. You can see he's been footing down. It looks like probably to pick up a little bit of speed, getting ready to tack, and he sees this hole between this line of boats here and the next pack that's coming. So he's flopped over onto port tack, and he is heading across the fleet. For him, this is a pretty easy decision. There isn't anybody coming right at him, any traffic that he's going to have to duck directly, except for these two boats down here, but he has plenty of speed to not be in their way. So you can see now he has done what we've talked about, which is he's sailing to the far side as far as he can of that hole to give him the room to foot down right here and get speed to stay in front of these boats that he just tacked right in front of and really have a pretty decent start considering where he was within the fleet. So here's the 3D angle, which lets you see quite a bit more. So here he is, boat 55. Now remember, this track coming out behind him, that's color-coded for speed. So we can see basically the green is slower, the yellow is going to be a little bit faster. So here he is again, footing down for that speed and tacking over. If you look, you can see the hole that he's seen. That's why he decided to make this tack across. And now, instead of just tacking right back onto starboard, he's going to go a little bit further to give himself that room to take full advantage of the hole and get really clear air. And here he is going to tack right in front of these other boats, and they were kind of slowing down, in that pack, getting ready. They didn't want to be too early for the start, but he sailed in on that port tack with clear air and really good speed and was able to maintain that and stay in front of them. So that's a pretty thorough explanation of the port tack approach. We'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more on our website, www.racecues.com/podcast, or search for Race Cues on iTunes and click subscribe. We would love to hear from you, so please give us a review on iTunes.